Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV, and thanks for joining us on RSA Week, RSAC to be exact. Let me introduce you to my next guest here. His name is Javed Hasan. Javed is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Lineaje with a J, and it's lineaje.com, Lineaje. Javed, it's great to have you on here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here with you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So it's a busy week, especially, for anyone in security, it's a busy week here. Someone said something on a video I was doing earlier today that the rest of the world outside security doesn't understand how big RSAC is, because it is so inward focused, right? It's kind of a security for security, or security conference for the security industry. But before we get into all that RSA stuff and what's going on in the world, Javed, let's talk a little bit about you. I mentioned you are the CEO and one of the co-founders of the company. But how did you come to that? Give us kind of, what happened, Javed, before Lineaje.
So Aaron, I've gotten old in cybersecurity. So it's
you and me both.
Yeah. So for the last 25 years, I have been working at two large security companies, twice each. One is Symantec and one is McAfee. And so a number of roles in cybersecurity, worked with almost every cybersecurity domain you can think of. Key roles I've done is I ran the largest business unit for Symantec, endpoint data center and cloud. And I ran overall portfolio strategy for McAfee, and then helped create Trellix and SkyHigh by merging, by defining the strategy for putting together McAfee and FireEye.
Right.
And
wow.
Right. So being around the block, and being in Silicon Valley, I thought at some point one should do a startup. So, and hence Lineaje.
Love it.
Yeah.
We'll talk off camera. I had so many friends over the years of both of those companies, right? I'm also we didn't call it cyber, we called it InfoSec, right? But I'm also in security 25 plus years, and it's been a lot of water under that bridge, right? So, but no one says, hey, I think I should do a startup. Well, let's do one. Anybody got a good name, and does it. We do a startup, and I've founded 3, 4, 5 companies myself over the years. I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands at this point, of founders, entrepreneurs. There's always some passion that drives you to do this. There's some problem that you feel absolutely needs to be solved. It may be a problem that you yourself faced, in your past positions, maybe a problem that you see out in the industry, but there's some problem that you're going to solve that somehow is going to make someone's life easier. What was that passion? What was that problem in Lineaje?
So if you think of software these days, so first thing is, where is the cybersecurity industry? So, I'm a strategic guy, I've done strategic roles. So I just sort of looked at it, when we looked at it at the end of McAfee / the creation of Trellix, we felt that there were a large number of companies in what we call runtime security. So if you think of Palo Alto, if you think of McAfee, if you think of Symantec, CrowdStrike, they invest all their effort in making sure that you run securely. So the firewall secures production areas and so on. Now, as we looked at software and for the last 20 years, there have been attacks that are inherently built into the software before it is deployed. So when you have runtime security, you assume what you are protecting is clean. And so you're protecting it from outside attackers, fundamentally. So if you just start now looking at it differently, SolarWinds had happened, right? Those kinds of attacks, Log4j had become very important at the time, right? And what happens is that if the software is inherently malicious or weak, how do you secure something like that? And if the software itself is the attack vector, like SolarWinds was, so it's an inside-out attack. So the interesting thing, and so we call it a supply chain attack. And for the last 20 years before that, supply chain attacks have been happening. And the most interesting thing about, and there is this category of tools called AppSec, but no AppSec vendor has ever detected a supply chain tamper or attack. So if you think of it, so software as it is being built can be compromised. And no vendor, if you go back, and not one will claim that they would have detected or they actually detected a SolarWinds or a supply chain compromise. So we felt that with more and more software being built and becoming critical, how do you essentially build software, secure software from scratch? And hence we've looked at it. And if you start thinking about it a little bit more deeply, which we did at Lineage, what you find is the problem is not the fact that developers are writing fundamentally insecure code. The problem is that we're using more and more of third-party components in our software. And so if you now look at a modern application being built in the last 5 years or last 10 years, 70 to 90% components are sourced. And 10 to 30% are built by developers in-house. And AppSec fundamentally assumed that by looking at the code inside a company and scanning it, somehow you can get developers to fix the 70 to 90% that is sourced. Right? And that, we believe, is a fundamentally incorrect assumption. The correct assumption is that if you can source safe components, then by and large your software will be secure, will be built secure. So we didn't see a significant player in that space. We didn't think any of the AppSec companies were trying to solve the more fundamental supply chain problem. So hence Lineage. So the name Lineage actually comes from lineage of software. So if the first thing you try to answer is, so that clue is in the name. Where does your software come from? What is its lineage? And the second thing then you say, where does risk come from? Does it come from your code or the code you source or third-party code that you keep? And then how do you eliminate risk in that code? So that's Lineage in a nutshell.
I love it. What a great story. This is why I ask these questions, because the entrepreneur in me, I find it fascinating, right? How we identify issues in the industry or issues in people's workflow and how it leads to companies, real life companies like this. Hey, I mentioned Lineage is spelled with a J and it's lineage.com. So, if you're interested, head on over there. You can get information. Javed, I wanted to spend the rest of our time talking about what's going on in the AppSec world. There are a lot of people clutching their pearls and running around henny penny saying the sky is falling, that AppSec is dead, that AppSec will never be the same, that Claude Opus and Claude security, code security, the amount of vulnerabilities, or the amount of potential vulnerabilities that it's finding, the idea of checking the code securing the code before we even put it into the supply chain. All of these things that AI is bringing to the table have moved the cheese in AppSec, if not downright changed the whole game. We're seeing, it's having a tremendous effect on open source, right? These maintainers who aren't paid to begin with can't keep up with the avalanche of bug reports. Even private company vendors can't keep up with it. So we're going to need a better mousetrap, I think. I think that as an industry, we need to adapt to this new reality. I wanted to ask you what you think about that and what you think the smarter AppSec or the better AppSec strategies are given this new reality we're living in.
So I say a few things. So the first thing is, Claude Code will become better and better at writing code.
No doubt.
Right? I mean, it's the beginning of that, right? So, and Claude Code, at some point, we should not need Claude Code security to write secure code. So inherently, we should assume that a year from now, Claude Code, and there are many of these tools, will inherently write secure code and don't need a additional layer to find issues. Well, right, you only need it if you're writing insecure code. So that's one, I think. So if you sort of now go back to the analogy I was talking about, Claude Code is writing what we would call first-party code, and then bringing in dependencies from open source. Now, if you touch open source inside a company, whether through Claude Code or through Claude Code security, you then own the fixes of it, and now you are fixing open source code. So most companies, most organizations are not that interested in fixing open source code that they ingest. Because now you have that responsibility of maintaining it, updating it. There's a certain cost structure that comes with it. And in most companies don't fund their development houses for it. So the way we see it, Claude Code and other tools are going to make Claude Code security and other tools working with Claude Code are going to make first-party code writing much better and more secure. They will still have to bring in dependencies, and the dependencies are increasingly not just normal open source, but AI dependencies, right? And, so if you think of MCP servers, LLMs, all that stuff that's coming in, right? So now you start moving into that domain. So which is why, like I started by saying, there's first-party code. I think first-party code actually did not have, when even it was developer written, as many vulnerabilities and risks as the third-party code and open source brought in. In fact, 95% of the risk in modern applications is sourced, not created by first-party code. So if you think, this is the more fundamental problem, this is why Lineaje was born. So what we did is we have created something we call gold open source. And what is gold open source? Gold open source is we take on the responsibility and we fix and give critical, high, and exploitable vulnerability-free open source packages that developers can use. And Claude Code and Claude Code security give us an opportunity, for example, and I think this is the future of AppSec, is to provide safe components that are already risk-free. And so as Claude Code writes code, it brings in a dependency A. We just swap A with gold A, making sure it's secure. So we think these are great changes. It does move the focus away in a very interesting way from finding bugs or finding vulnerabilities and prioritizing them. So it opens the box and says we can find and fix all of it. So we no longer have to go, companies no longer have to go and deliver applications that say that where 10% of the vulnerabilities are fixed because 90% were deprioritized. And deprioritized still means they exist. It simply means that they were not. We found a justification for not fixing it, right? And so today, about 1.5% of all vulnerabilities are exploitable. Now, offensive AI is already showing that with appropriate AI tools, you can now exploit about 87 to 90% of all vulnerabilities. So the number of exploited vulnerabilities will continue to increase. So you have to fix all of it. And I think the way we see it, Claude Code security, Claude Code working with gold open source can eliminate 100% of the vulnerabilities so that you don't have them at all in your code. So I think it opens up a great future, but Claude Code security plus with safe open source is the solution there.
I agree. I agree. And frankly, that's the way it should be, right? Because that's what good entrepreneurs, professional, strategic folks, you don't clutch your pearls and say the sky is falling. I think every successful entrepreneur I know is an optimist. You show them a room full of horse manure. They say, "I know there's a pony here somewhere," right? and it's the same thing here, right? Look, the game's changed a little bit, but it creates opportunities. It creates opportunities for us to do this better.
Yeah, and so I'll add one more thing to what you just said, and it does. So then the question also is, so if you now look at AI systems, we just touched on them, right? And you say, look, there's a prompt and I can interact with it with a prompt, ask questions, get it to process the invoice, do whatever the agent wants me to do, right? Or is trained to do. Now what we are seeing is the rise of a new attack surface. So now you're looking at, we are hearing terms like prompt injection attacks. We are hearing things like reasoning compromise, LLM poisoning, data leakage, which is very different from it, right? So what we are suddenly seeing is that new software, new agentic AI software actually is introducing a new category of risks and threats. And so one of the things that we are completely transitioned to is how do you build AI applications that are not just vulnerability free, which is just one narrative, that are now threat free, that are self-hardening, they protect themselves automatically. So no prompt injection attacks, no reasoning compromise, so on, right? No data loss, agent identities are well controlled. So as old things get better, the cybersecurity is a world where new challenges come continuously. And so we announced a new product, and it's the first time I'm talking about it, called Unify AI, so UNIF AI, which is all about how do you build secure agentic AI applications so you are inherently built secure, right? And which addresses all of these new threat vectors and new weaknesses as you build agentic AI applications. So we are very excited about that. So I'd like to say, there is a horse in there somewhere. And we think
Absolutely.
that secure AI is the new horse.
So, there was a conference last week. They talked a little bit about agentic AI and security, right? Yeah. The NVIDIA thing. And it look, clearly, the agentic AI, I mean, even more than code security and Opus and all these things, the idea of the code being generated and how agents are just exploding on our workflows and on everything we do. But the one thing that can really hold that back is security, right? Yeah. Because these things need guardrails, they need governance, they need compliance, they need security.
You nailed it, right? I mean, so, in this last week's conference, they talked a lot about Gold Claw. And Gold Claw is phenomenal, right? I mean, the question is, how do you secure Gold Claw, right? So they announced a little bit of movement there, and you will see Lineaje go down the same path with saying, how do you secure any agent, right? So I think that's Unify. So we're very excited about that opportunity and what the new
is that available now, Javed?
Yes, we announced it last Thursday. So it is absolutely available just in time for RSA. So very excited about it. It's the industry's first autonomous AI policy orchestrator, enabling companies to define security policies and then apply them autonomously as software is built.
Love it. Javed, we're about out of time. I apologize, but it was a great conversation. You're going to be out in San Francisco this week as well. I'm there. We're on Broadcast Alley all week, live. Come by, say hello. I'd love to see you in person.
Yeah, I will come by. And thank you for a great conversation, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Javed Hasan, co-founder, CEO of Lineaje, here on Techstrong TV. Enjoy our RSA coverage. We'll be back with more. Hey, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel from Techstrong. We're going to continue with this fantastic series we're doing of sessions between some of the leaders at Microsoft as well as analysts from the Futurum Group. In this next session, we're lucky to have Clay Wesener. Clay is the partner for GPM Power App Studios at Microsoft, and Futurum analyst Keith Kirkpatrick. In today's session, it's really a customer success story where Clay, joined by Keith, are going to delve into a real-world customer story. In this case, Wells Fargo, offering a blueprint for leaders ready to scale success in the age of intelligent apps. You're going to see how Power Platform is being used to modernize complex, regulated workflows with Copilot Studio agents and Power Apps. This session will highlight architecture, business impact, and lessons learned from deploying intelligent apps at scale. I think it's really a great session you're going to enjoy. Let's go to Clay and Keith.
Hi, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick, Research Director with the Futurum Group. I cover enterprise software and digital workflows.
Hi, my name's Clay Wesener. I look after our low-code developer experiences on the Power Platform.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Clay. Maybe, Clay, you could talk to me, though, a little bit how Power Platform can actually help these organizations balance that agility to handle these types of scenarios with their compliance needs that often come up when you're dealing with things like banking, insurance, or any one of these regulated types of processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we within the product, we sort of refer to this as managed platform because it is very much a feature of the platform of how you can govern at this scale. And this has come from, not just us deciding exactly what's going to be in there, but really for folks and customers leveraging low code over the last 10 years and evolving to have a really, really strong governance. Because I think we learned very early on in the journey that if those guardrails are not there, people are just inclined to want to turn it off. And we're very much, I use the word guardrails deliberately. And a lot of the things we do in a managed platform is focused around how do we give you the right controls so you can still enable these types of tools, whether it be building apps, building automations out at scale, but do it in a way with the right sort of controls and guardrails on it. And so like examples are things like data loss prevention. So I can set rules around what connectors and what data you can access versus someone else. And so I can also say how many people you can share an app or a workflow or something with. So I can sort of mitigate the risk that you might be able to have working in low code versus someone that's received more training or onboarded to the platform. And so typically what we see customers do is sort of implement this zoned approach of, their zone one is everyone in the organization. And they say you can build apps for personal productivity. You can connect to your office data. You can sort of work with those well-known sources. And you can go and share apps and flows and agents with up to 10 people, as an example. But once you want to go beyond that, we want you to engage a little more with IT. We want to make sure things are supported. We want to make sure that, we have the right controls, whether that be accessibility on apps or the correct support path. And then what typically happens is we'll then have a zone 2, which is potentially some more sensitive data, potentially, ability to share with more people within the organization. And what folks might do then is they might say, well, this is for our divisional leads or our champs within each group that we've onboarded, we've trained, they understand the platform a little bit more. And then that final zone would be your IT, your dev center, who's working with your really critical data around things like finance and HR. And what we've just tried to make sure we do in the platform is give you the right controls that someone can still come to make.power apps, make.power automate and start building. And they're not going to fall into a trap there. They're going to fall into the pit of success because we've put those right guardrails on what they can access and what they can do.
If you look at not just if we're talking about, let's say, agentic technology, but just everything, if you look at the development of the smartphone, everyone expects sort of a consumer grade experience throughout all facets of their life. And I guess that, do you see that sort of pushing or helping to evolve kind of what customer success might look like, not just now, but into the future?
Again, earlier in the low-code journey, it was always IT departments, development teams that were looking at the low-code platform. And more these days, as we're talking to customers, it'll be their employee experience team. It will be folks responsible for actually healthy and productive employee experiences. And that's what I mean. It's not just about cost saving, but it's about bringing the right tools in. There's the SNCF, the French Railway, are actually a really good example. They run Power School, which is an onboarding school for the whole Power platform when any new employee starts. And this is becoming a really, really common practice that more and more folks are, as they join an organization, they're getting training on these tools, not as something they have to use to do their job, but as a benefit to them to be able to do their job in a more productive way. And I think, again, the consumer push and acceleration of AI is just accelerating that within the enterprise as well.
Right. When you're talking about human in the loop, you raise a really good point, because ultimately this is still new technology, and you want to make sure that, particularly in, you're dealing in a commercial environment, that you don't want this agentic technology to sort of run wild or unchecked. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, have you seen other examples where customers have actually deployed their sort of checks and balances to make sure that their technology does what it's supposed to?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of ways we're seeing folks doing that. One is just in how we define and build the agents and the tools themselves. While that agent has the ability to issue refunds, it can only do them up to £100. So it has very specific guidelines built into it that once it goes over certain criteria, loop in a human, send them an approval workflow so that they can approve this, review the details. So that first one is just very structured, giving the agent details. The other side, and this is where we've sort of really seen how apps have evolved in the last couple of years. If you've been looking at what we've done with Power Apps, we've introduced this concept of an agent feed, which is really about, in the same UI that you would come into the app and do your day-to-day work, you start getting this feed of activity from the agents that are in your digital team effectively. And so you can start seeing where they're completing actions, where they might need assistance, or where they're getting blocked. And so what we're starting to see there is even our UI patterns of what we traditionally thought an app is starting to bring in this agentic behavior to give, that human in a loop and that oversight capabilities. So I still want someone to have a really clear view of what tasks are being completed by the agents, what's being completed by AI. And in that view, be able to get into the reasoning, understand the logic and sort of the thought process that the agent followed behind it. So it's not a mystery of why something progressed or why an action was performed. But as the human responsible managing that team of agents, I can effectively go in and see why it did something. That might be then come a teaching moment for the agent where we correct that behavior or change it for future cases as well.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned sort of the generational shifts that are going on. We're seeing the, entry of these, I guess you'd call them AI natives, coming into the workforce where they don't know anything other than a world with AI. And I guess, that kind of begs the question, we've heard so much about AI in the past, particularly the last couple of years. Can you talk to me a little bit about, what role can AI actually play within customer success? Because, it's a wide, AI has so many capabilities, but I'd just be curious to see if we could boil it down to this function.
Yeah. And I think it honestly depends on the customer and how they're approaching it. One of my favorite examples of, I think, sort of scale and pace, PG&E here in the United States, they're a big Power Platform user, and we talk about scale. I think they estimate, since they started their journey in 2021, along the lines of like $38 million in savings that they accrue to the Power Platform, like huge in terms of scale. But so much of actually what they've implemented is not just, cost efficiencies. They introduced an agent called Peggy. And they actually have a nice little avatar for Peggy that they introduced across the organization. And Peggy now handles, it's between 30 to 40% of their IT help desk calls. So built-in Copilot Studio, Peggy has access to their knowledge base, all their policies and documentation. And just Peggy one agent, they estimate saves them about $800,000 a year. And it's absolutely transformational. And so even with the savings they were getting on the Power Platform between apps and automation, there's a limit. Mm-hmm. There's a limit to how much productivity that can drive. Agentic, tools and what people are able to build in Copilot Studio has really just broken through that barrier. And, you look at, again, someone like PG&E, when they implemented Peggy, it was very simple, looking over knowledge bases, access to information. It helped a large volume of sort of tickets that would come through the help desk that used to be a human replying to an email or replying to an IM. Those humans now are actually providing much higher quality support on more technical cases. They're not helping someone log into Citrix for the first time or point them to something that's really well documented. Peggy's able to do that. But then they've also continued to evolve it over time. And so again, one of my favorites that Peggy can do is getting folks that get locked out of their SAP accounts. One of the most common things that IT apparently happens thousands of times. And now Peggy, using an integration between Copilot Studio and Power Automate, can actually open up SAP and go and unblock that person's account for them after they interact with her on Teams. And so this was something that was critical to an end user to get unblocked really, really quickly. Peggy's able to do that for them fast, but it wasn't high value from an IT support team and what they were really providing. Them going and opening up an account and unchecking a blocked checkbox. And so I feel it's a really good example of where they started simple. They focused over sort of knowledge-based examples. They evolved it into actions, but it's something where they've gone for a high volume, cost inefficient area. They've applied agentic AI to it. And that's something that, go back 3 or 4 years ago, would have been an extremely expensive tool to go and implement. Leveraging LLMs and leveraging Copilot Studio, they've been able to do all that in low code, which is super impressive.
I'm curious, one thing, Clay, that you alluded to earlier is if we think about how apps were previously developed and rolled out, it was IT who kind of managed that. Now what it sounds like what you're saying is we're getting to the point where business leaders or even folks who are working within departments may be able to actually launch apps or launch agents, obviously with that human in the loop and with those, specific guardrails. Are you seeing any kind of patterns emerging in terms of, customers who successfully scaled this agentic automation from more of a grassroots approach as opposed to springing from IT?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we sort of see it approached from both directions, and some customers very deliberately approach it from one or the other to start with. I actually, of all the examples I've sort of talked about today, do quite well balancing both spectrums and both ends of the spectrum. Sorry, and I think that's where you start getting the real value multipliers. PG&E, great example. I talked about Peggy earlier. That's an IT or centrally led tool. It was about optimizing a process within the IT team. But at the same time, they have thousands of developers across their organizations. And when I say developers, I mean low-code citizen developers that are enabled to go and build apps, to go and build agents, to go and build automation across their team. And they've sort of very deliberately focused their center of excellence, their digital transformation team, on a few core objectives. So that's the team that sets their governance policies, make sure it's scalable. And then they also support and train those different sort of divisional leads across the company. PG&E actually, again, I think they're on the spectrum, the end of the spectrum where they're doing this, in a really amazing way. They have a conference every year called Level Up now, where they actually get together all their citizen developers and those divisional leads from across the company to come together, share stories, share learnings, and sort of explain new technology. But it starts becoming a real cultural tool in that they're enabling people to go and solve these problems, make themselves and their teams more efficient. And there's there's reward that comes from that. They're getting folks together, they're getting a lot of learning. And so I think, while lots of companies are enabling citizen development, the ones where we see it's truly being successful, they're bringing this level of evangelism to it.
Well, Clay, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of these platform features that are kind of critical for managing customer success initiatives, because it really seems like, there obviously you have the human component, but there's also the technology side in terms of making sure there are the right tools in place to help organizations, address all of these issues.
There's obviously the human and technology component. I would also say there's just the practices and sort of learnings. We actually have some good documented platform guidance out there of like, what are the best practices in thinking about this zoned approach that I was talking about, and in how people can sort of apply different levels of control to different parts of the organization. I would say then we start looking at the specific technology. One, a lot of those guardrails just light up directly in the product. So as a new citizen developer, as a maker, when I go land at any one of the Power Platform tools, I can get welcome guidance with links to internal learning, explanations of where I can go to support. I get routed to my own personal developer environment. So I actually have a sort of controlled, dedicated environment for me to go explore in, to experiment in. I'm not sort of working in prod. I have the ability to be controlled. And then things like pipelines, which effectively are a low-code ALM tool, so that once I do build something, I can either use it for myself and my personal environment, but if it gets to the point where it does make sense for it to be deployed somewhere centrally, leveraged by others, I can go through an automated deployment process where the right checks go. I have an AI advisor that reviews my code, makes sure my apps are secure and performant and accessible, and then get the right approvals before that gets deployed. And it's really that mix of, we want to democratize, we want to make these things available to everyone across the organization, but then have these right built-in tools so that you don't have to go read a wiki to find out what's the process that you should follow. It's built in to the developer tool. So I kind of just, as I start building, get guided to the right environment. I get guided to use the right data. I get guided to share it and deploy it in the right way. And all of that we bundle up and sort of leverage within that managed environment, which gives the admins, the IT, the central digital teams that control centrally to sort of set up those tools and that content that they want available across the organization.
It sounds like all of these tools, really underscore what you were talking about before, which is this culture of trying to utilize technology in a way where it's deployed at the right time, in the right space, and with the appropriate guardrails, but while still fostering a culture of experimentation and ensuring that people feel empowered to use these new tools.
You're absolutely right. Like the cultural, I think when we talk about your first question about like, what's the new definition of customer success? I think it's the customers that have implemented the right culture and it feeling like it is a culture of empowerment and experimentation, not not something that they have to fight really hard to get access to. Because that's where a lot of these examples where we have customers turn around, they've built something that's ended up saving them millions of dollars. It came from the expert that was involved in the business process. It didn't come from a central team. And to get that creativity and get that ideation, you need to give people access to these tools. And, we sort of regularly, I regularly reference, Jurassic Park, life will always find a way. And I think, so will users, so will makers, they will find a way. And to restrict these tools, to hide them, folks will go find a tool on the web that can help them be more efficient in their job. The companies that are doing this right are making it part of their culture to provide those tools and just really enable people from the get-go.
The technology is probably going to be more accurate over time if you're talking about trying to, really assess, images and differences between them. But, one of the other things I'm really curious about is how can agentic AI and all of this technology be used in regulated industries? I'm thinking in particular financial services, banking, insurance, where, there's a lot of complex process, but you also have to be mindful of all of the regulations that are attached to those industries.
Yeah. It's actually quite surprising, I think, in this technology shift with AI compared to when we moved to the cloud, compared to internet, compared to a lot of the others. I think actually the regulated industries have actually been quite a lot of the front runners on this. EY, for example, built PowerPost, which helped them with their financial processing, sort of end of month processing. They built this as a sort of typical low code application. They're already looking at how they bring agentic checks into it to make sure that things are being posted into the right period, that they have the right information. Again, time consuming sort of manual checks. Wells Fargo have rolled out agents to more than 4,000 branches. A huge, huge number. And they targeted a process that was around their branch forms and procedure management. And this is something that was particularly time consuming. So if you went into a branch and said, I need to set a power of attorney, or I need to open an account and, under maybe a non-traditional circumstance, there's a huge amount of internal documentation around those procedures, the right forms, the right information to collect. And before, that would mean as a customer is standing there with the branch member, they're looking up that information, trying to go find the right procedure, going to find the right form. So a heavily regulated scenario, but also really impacting a customer who's literally standing in front of you, waiting, maybe on their lunch break, trying to get through the bank really quickly. And so they rolled out an agent, across all their branches to actually manage that forms and procedure scenarios. And so that now in the branches, those employees are jumping straight onto an agent, talking about the scenario that the customer has and working with this agentic AI to basically get guidance on the right forms, the right procedures to follow. Even in these regulated industries, they're seeing the value in AI. And I think it's more about how they do it, making sure they have the right checks in place, making sure they have the right guardrails, rather than what they probably would have done 5 years ago where they just tried to turn it off.
We talked a little bit about, potential friction there, but are there any other sort of potential hurdles that organizations need to be wary of? And what's sort of your take on a solution?
Like most things, we talked about human in the loop, making sure you introduce this technology in the right way to organizations is really, really important. I mentioned EY earlier. They were really, really successful in, after building PowerPost, which helps them manage their sort of end of month financial processing. It simplified it. It brought in some agentic behavior to validate quality. And they had huge gains in efficiencies in both. I think it was 70% in sort of the time, or 95% in lead time to get things posted, and about a 35% cost saving for them. So real sort of impact to the efficiencies of their users. But what they did really well was, once they built that tool, they told that story. They evangelized it. And so they helped people understand that this is how this technology was helping them. This is how it was implemented. And that not only made, obviously, people a lot more receptive to onboard and leverage the technology, but it also started driving this ideation of other things to go improve within the organization and using similar technology. A lot of these companies are not coming in and doing a full low code approach of apps and agents and automation and reports all on day one. Where we're seeing folks be really successful is they're leveraging the composability of the platform. They're starting with, for example, they might have a legacy application that's inefficient for a user. So they go and use an app. They build more efficient, streamlined UI over the top of that. That's an incremental solution they can deploy. They can get out to their users and start seeing benefits. Then on that same app, they can go and add automation. They can start getting approval workflows. Then they can start bringing in agentic AI, getting that automation and that AI behavior, incrementally building these solutions over time. And it's very much, intentionally how we've designed the platform in that these are not all or nothing solutions. And, back to our earlier conversation, pace is extremely important these days. And people don't want to go do a 12-month waterfall project of every requirement met. They want to find ways to incrementally build. And by leveraging a platform that has common governance, these tools are designed to work together, apps with automation, with agentic behavior, integrated into Copilot with that unified platform.
So essentially, you're setting up a framework to enable organizations to really drive these best practices in terms of making sure that, yes, you are implementing new technology, but you're doing it in a thoughtful way where you have the right checks in place, and you really are making sure there's other things that you need there. You need the audit trails. You need to make sure that when you do a project, you're going back and you're actually assessing, does the technology achieve the goals that we set out to when we deployed it?
Exactly, and I think it's that. There's two parts to it. One is that being proactive. So as you're releasing a new app or a new agent to the organization, do you have the right controls around it, the right guardrails from the beginning? And again, our goal is let's have the right framework, the right tools, the right guidance to go really enable that, and let an organization tailor those guardrails to sort of accommodate their level of risk, what they're comfortable with doing. But then on the flip is make sure we just have the right visibility, the right auditability, so that as you're leveraging AI more and more within the organization, it's really transparent about what it's doing. I think one of my favorite things with Copilot Studio, and Pets at Home is a great example of this as it's interacting with customers on customer service. You can go into any step through any sort of run or action the agent has performed and understand its thought process. Why did it do this particular step? What were the inputs? What were the outputs? What were the reasoning? And not just understand it, but then also help teach it to handle sort of moments in a different way in the future. And I think having those sort of tools from a governance perspective just built in. Again, we talk about it being unified for the developer, unified for the end user, but also for the admin, so that they're doing in this sort of a central and controlled way. And even then, whether you're building an app, an automation, an agent, you've got that composability across the platform, but I don't think admins really want a super composable admin story. They want that to be a lot more unified and controlled. So, it's bringing the blend of those worlds of let's bring together multiple technology, multiple tools, but make sure then you sort of have one central view of how it's all coming together.
If you want to really drive the use of new technology, you need to do it in a very stepwise fashion using a platform that allows you to unify people, processes, technology. It doesn't make any sense to try to do it in a very disjointed way. You won't have the governance required to do it safely. You'll confuse people in terms of which tool should I use, which approach should I use. Ultimately, it really does matter to make sure that you have a unified way of approaching the implementation of new technology. It's also really critical to make sure that as you go about your journey, whether it's implementing low-code processes, implementing agentic technology, to have a clear understanding of your business goals. What outcomes do you want? How are you going to measure them? And then how are you going to take all of these different learnings and then streamline it so you can actually apply it and scale it over the enterprise, not just for today, not just for tomorrow, but well into the future. And finally, I think the most important thing that kind of resonated with me today is you need to look for a trusted partner, trusted technology partner to help you through this journey. Agentic technology is very new. Low code, yes, it's been around for a while, but there are still quite a few pitfalls that can be out there. To go it on your own can be very, very challenging because you have all of that risk of potentially opening yourself up for errors, missteps, and of course, there's that, we talked about it a little bit today, regulatory concerns. It makes a lot of sense to partner with a company that has experience working with other enterprises to deliver these types of benefits using that new technology.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. Hey, my next guest for you is Darren Kimura. Darren is the CEO and president of a company called AISquared. Let's welcome him to Techstrong. Hey Darren, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, Alan. Great to be here.
Thank you, and it's great to have you on. So, Darren, we're going to talk all about AISquared. We're going to talk about AI and jobs. But before we talk about all that, let's talk a little about you. Our audience is going to be listening to you. What should they know about you?
Well, I'm originally from Hawaii, so I was born and raised in the Hawaiian Islands. I grew up initially on a plantation, so I started my career, cutting sugarcane. And then in the very earliest days, when I was about 12 years old, I was an electrician. My dad decided to start a company, and it was a contracting company. So I was a little guy, and because, I was 12, I was the guy climbing through the roofs and doing all the wiring at the edges of the
fit
dusty.
good into the tight spaces.
I could fit into the tight spaces, exactly. And, it was a great experience. I mean, I had to wash the vans on the weekend and clean the floor of the warehouse. I mean, all of those kinds of things, all those things that small business owners do every single day. And it was a great start in my career. From there, I went into electrical engineering and began designing power systems. And one of the things that I started to do very early on, this was about 19 years old while I was a sophomore in college, was doing energy efficiency designs in buildings. So that means I would go into a building and I would figure out ways to have it use less energy, better air conditioning, better lighting. And the idea was a perfect idea at that time because we were facing energy crisis, energy shocks, high energy costs. So the business just grew and grew and grew. And out of Hawaii, we grew and we went to the Pacific Northwest and ultimately 14 offices around the United States. And a private equity fund came and said, hey, I'd love to buy the company. And I said, wow, this is cool. I never thought I could build a company to sell it. I always thought, you build a company to run it.
Right, yeah.
So that kind of became my journey. Sold the business and said, let's do it again. I was in my early 20s and started a solar company at the right time. And, this was before the global solar markets came online and invented a solar panel, got 14 patents, built factories and installed systems in 70 countries around the world. It was quite an incredible journey. Took it public, got rolled up into one of the largest publicly traded solar companies at that time called SunEdison, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. And then, enjoyed or experienced life as a publicly traded company. From there, I became a venture capitalist. I wanted to invest in the companies. I had always previously run the companies. So I decided to get into investing in companies and really see it from the other side, and invested in about 20 companies. Experienced 3 IPOs over that journey and sold 5 companies.
That's great. 20 to 3 is a great ratio, man.
It was very different, but I realized though it wasn't for me. I'm not a great investor. I'm a much more enthusiastic operator. So I love going into the businesses and creating value and figuring out product market fit and how do you grow quick and all those things. That's really where I really get, kind of tuned in. So I ended up joining one of our portfolio companies, and this was in network management. So we had servers that would basically sit across the network and watch network traffic.
Sure.
And that company went incredibly fast. We went from 0 to 50 in about 4 years and got bought again by a private equity firm. And then I got into cybersecurity, started a cyber company, and today here I am at AISquared.
Very cool. What a great journey this has been, man. Good for you. What island are you from in Hawaii?
I'm from the Big Island, so most people know us for the active volcano. Yeah, Hilo. I'm from the Hilo side of the Big Island.
Sure, on the rainy side.
The rain, exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing we're known for is the rain. Yes.
Yeah, Hilo's there. So I love Hawaii. I first went to Hawaii. Actually, February was 36 years ago on honeymoon, and I went back 5, 6, 7 years in a row after that. Then had kids, and it's hard going from the East Coast to Hawaii with little kids.
Yeah.
But once they got old enough, maybe 16 or so, we started doing our annual trek again. And, I've been to Hawaii now I couldn't tell you how many times, but I don't know, at least 25, something like that.
Wow. More times than me, probably.
Well,
Since I've been back. Yeah.
Maui is our favorite, though we've been to
Yeah.
all the islands. And we used to stay in West Maui, and since the fire, we kind of bummed out, that
Right.
it was a terrible, terrible disaster there. But anyway, it's a great story with so much success, man. Congratulations. That's an amazing journey. Let's talk a little bit about AISquared, right? Obviously, it has the word AI in it. We're going to assume AI has something to do with it, but give us the AISquared kind of rundown.
Yeah. So I joined the company as the company was looking to grow, and the investors were looking for someone who had scaled a business before. And obviously, we all know what's going on with AI. It's going so fast right now. Companies are getting bigger, faster than ever in history. And this was obviously about 2 years ago. So this is before, we have the benefit of hindsight now, but they knew what was coming. So I was brought in, and one of the things, or a few of the things that really caught my attention was the background of the company. So this company actually started working inside of the intelligence community at the Department of Defense at the time. And what the team did was they were all part of the NSA, and they were all responsible to build secure data pipelines to run machine learning models and create top secret reports. So it's a very secure platform. What it does is we go in and we connect to all the different locations that a company might store your data. So for example, if you're using Google Drive or OneDrive, some organizations that are larger could be using things like Snowflake or Databricks or even AWS. We basically just suck all that information into the platform. And then once it's in the platform, we can go and activate a bunch of different ML models or AI models to make the data more usable. We apply intelligence to it. It's done in a secure way. And then we add things like trust and governance. We make sure that the results are compliant with whatever your industry requirements might be. For example, in the healthcare industry, they have HIPAA. So you want to make sure that the results coming out of the large language model are going to be compliant with HIPAA. So we can do that. These are all components of our system. And then we take all of the insights and we put them where you work. So for example, it might be in Teams or Zoom. It could be in SharePoint or in Salesforce.com or even in a website. It doesn't matter to us. We take all of the different, we call them applications, right? Data applications, and we put them where you want. And we do it in a very secure way. So it was such an interesting proposition because the company had this rich history in dealing with the most sensitive data in the world, building these really incredibly robust and secure data pipelines, and then working with enterprises, which is my favorite thing to do, to make their end users, make their salespeople, make their finance people a lot more efficient, work faster, reduce errors. Just the perfect situation for me. And as you know from my past, I love to go into companies at that inflection point when the industry is taking off, when the business is taking off. So I just saw all of those things here in AISquared, and I was just thrilled to join the company.
Very cool. Very cool. So you joined, you said about 2 years ago. How old is the company though?
About 5 years.
So so this predates the whole ChatGPT kind of explosion.
Yeah, so we call that the transformer model component, and this company was really it's still within the AI era, but at the earlier days, to your point, there were still large language models, just not as smart, but also a lot of data science models back then.
Sure.
Things that can do predictions.
A
for
lot
example.
of ML,
A lot of
kind
ML.
of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So we can do
Pattern
everything
matching.
from your traditional ML and, bring it all into large language models as you know them today. The platform is designed to be very robust. So as models change, we can actually swap models in and out. We actually have some technology that can figure out the right model for you, depending on whatever your question is or who the user might be. So it's a very flexible model designed for growth, designed for the future.
So Darren, I've founded a bunch of companies myself, venture-backed and so forth. One of the things I learned about working when you come out of the DoD, the federal marketplace, but DoD and agencies specifically, and I learned this lesson the hard way, unfortunately, is that we wound up making a product that was so specific to the DoD and agency mission. And that just didn't lend itself as well to like, we went the same way, enterprise, DoD. Even the enterprises didn't want, and it was a cyber company. They didn't want that military grade cyber as much as we thought they would. But in the meantime, we had a lot of contracts and, business within that DoD world. But it just didn't translate to the civilian market. I wonder, now you guys clearly come from the DoD side of it. Have you been able to transition to a civilian, if you will, use case that where you got market fit and everything else?
No, you're so right, because when you build for, mil spec or mil grade, it's completely different, right? And when you build for that, you have components in there that you may not necessarily need in the commercial world.
That would be overkill, yeah.
It would be overkill. So you're completely right. One of the things that I've really done is spend a lot of my time in coming up through enterprise. So I spend a lot of time with the customers, focusing on user experience. And I think that's maybe where the big shift has been for AISquared, where we still can build for mil spec. And we do that, of course, for the military work that we do, the DoD work that we do. But a lot of what we do is also focus on the user experience, the UI, making sure that the workflows completely connect with each other and they're logical, familiar look and feel, drag and drop, right? No code. It's really important, I think, these days to go to no code. And some of that, by the way, is also usable back in the DoD, DOW world. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we started with our mission as being was to help the warfighter be able to deploy AI models from where they are. So if you think about a lot of times, what happens is warfighters might be in the back of a Humvee working on a laptop, and it's really tough to write code when you're bouncing around in the back of a Humvee. So we had to make the code in such a way where it was basically no code, right? Drag and drop, so that we have lines and connect lines to, images or cards as we call them. And that allows them to be able to create the workflows. That's also very usable in the enterprise too. Now, what we're doing one step beyond that in the enterprise is we're actually bringing vibe coding. Everyone's talking about vibe coding and how you can create an application in hours these days. Well, AISquared can create the AI pipelines, the secure data pipelines by vibe coding as well. So you can go into a prompt and say, connect my Databricks to this model and put that into Salesforce, enter. And we're able to create the entire code without having to code Python.
I love it. It's funny. I actually had just finished an article before I came into the studio here to do this with you on, what's the first AI war? Was it Russia, Ukraine? Is it this current Israel, U.S. with Iran? Is it Iran, Israel from June? Whichever one you want to pick, we're really starting to see the influence of AI, right, in our war fighting. But I want to get away from war fighting. Enough wars. Let's talk. Well, before we do, just for people who want to get more information about AISquared, actually, I don't think we mentioned the website.
Sure.
What is it?
Yeah, it's AISquared.ai. We have a lot of AI. AISquared.
AISquared.ai. That's a good pun. And that's great stuff. So I'd recommend, all you're watching, you want to go check out what Darren and the team here have built, AISquared.ai. Darren, I want to kind of pivot now to the bigger AI question, right? And it's one that we get. It's one that I write a lot about. I speak a lot about on these videos. Jobs, AI and jobs, right? If anyone out there saying, I don't worry about how AI is going to affect my job or whether AI is going to replace me, they really are not. They're either not telling you the truth or they just haven't been paying attention, right? I mean, clearly AI is having an impact. I'm not saying it's going to take your job. I always say you're going to lose your job to someone who uses AI if you don't. But,
that's really good. Yeah.
But from where you sit, what do you think? Job killer, job creator, a little of both?
I generally think we're on a journey, and What we saw and probably still see, particularly from corporates, is a convenient excuse to be able to reduce costs, which in many cases comes through headcount reduction, and today that is AI. So you're definitely seeing across corporate America, we're cutting 40% of our workforce because of AI. But if you look really closely and you listen to some of these earnings calls, what you're also finding is that they're realizing AI may not be there yet, may not be as accurate, and as a result of that, there's not as much trust. So what they're having to do is backfill that now with humans. Salesforce, for example, about 6 months ago, 9 months ago, had talked about headforce reductions. Recently, they talked about rehiring 3,000 employees because the AI agents that they had deployed were not accurate enough, and they now have to go back and verify them. Now, I do think that's also a temporary thing. I think over the course of time, these systems will get better, get smarter. Eventually, they'll regain, our trust. But it's a little bit of both, right? So as you framed it, it's going to be some companies are early adopters and are really aggressive. Other companies are maybe not as much, and everything in between.
Yeah. I mean, I see it too. We as we were talking off camera, I told you we really have made a big push with agentic AI over the last 2-3 weeks. New. I mean, this is still new. And what I'm already starting to see is, I'll have this newsletter template. Perfect. Better than we've ever had. All right. Let's just run it every day now at 6 a.m., right? All the integrations are done. And every day there's a little drift. You know what I mean? Every day it's
Yes.
something a little different where I got to go, hey, how come you changed this? Or how come that color's not there? Or this font? And it's like, oh, and you know how AI is. It's very polite. Oh, my bad. Let me correct that. I don't know why this happened. Boom, boom, boom. And so is it perfect? No. It's far from perfect. Is it getting better every day and week? Absolutely. I think the bigger issue, and this is what I tell my people here at Techstrong, you've got to figure out what this can help you in your everyday task. What can it take over from you in your everyday task that allows you to do something even more that you don't get the time to really do, but could be really important? And the other thing is it's good at doing that task, but it doesn't necessarily think that task up. And you as a human have to think that spark of creation, if you will, and then tell it to go do it. That's what's going to be the difference between human and machine in terms of doing these things. And the idea of creating, of building, of coming up with that idea, with that spark, I don't think AI is going to do that anytime soon. And that's what I'm encouraging my people, where they need to develop their thinking skills, just their curiosity to go do things and explore things and push these boundaries. And I see it every single day here, Darren. I'm seeing every day, because everyone reports to me, hey, this is what I've been doing today with it. This is the new thing I taught it. I have it doing this, so I'm doing that, right? And I looked at a new way of doing it. So it is very exciting. But, the other thing here's another thing I've seen. I don't know if you've seen this. People who get it, who buy into it, they're almost manic about it, right? Like they don't want to go home. They come in on weekends. They work from it at home. They want to use it and keep pushing and exploring and trying and experimenting. That scares me a little too, though, because that leads to burnout. Eventually, you can't do 70-hour work weeks forever, and that's a problem. I'm wondering you're probably, you're seeing it across multiple companies, your experience. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think AI is leverage. I mean, I think if used properly, it
way.
can help you exactly to what you were saying earlier, right? And I think I love the way you have this feedback loop within your organization where you encourage the use of it, but then tell me how you're using it, right? And iterate from that. It allows you to be much more efficient, in particular with some of the more routine projects or work that you would do in your everyday, which I think is so powerful, because then it allows the human mind to do what it does best, right? Be creative, solve difficult problems, think about big picture strategies, and that is uniquely human. Maybe one day in the future, who knows what's going to happen. But today, this is where I think we set ourselves apart from AI, which is more predictive, and humans, which are a lot more creative. So, if you think about some of the best things in life, right? These are plays and songs and, just things we enjoy, movies. It's the impromptu moments, right? It's the imperfection in the drawing that makes it so perfect, right? It's that movement that was unscripted, or that line that was, again, unscripted, but that's what makes it human, and that's what draws people in. And I think, again, that is really uniquely human. And that's also what I think engages us in that work. So if it's like a routine thing, routine codes, to your point, newsletters and whatnot, I think that's fine. Let's leave that to agents to automatically work on that, work with the agents to come up with, the right guide rails for that, and continue to push that forward so you can produce more of it. But then on the other side, to your point, here I live in Silicon Valley, and we do have companies that are looking at, 9 to 9 work days, 6 days a week, 70-hour work weeks. Really difficult, but they see it as a very long sprint. It's a race to, whatever the next checkpoint is, whether it's the finish line or maybe, an incremental finish line along the course of this race. So you definitely do have that. You have other countries working in that way as well. China is an example of where that concept came from. So they are trying to, work 24/7 and get ahead of it and build code and deploy apps and, make robots smarter than ever before. So it's a mix. I mean, it comes down to, I think, philosophy a little bit. Like, our philosophy at AISquared is you need to have work-life balance. I think creating reliable technologies that are, again, balance in humanity, but also taking advantage of the advantages of AI. I think
what
that's
it offers.
Of what it could be, but do it in a safe way. One of the things that really encourages me about what we're doing is that we bring in the safety layer, we bring in the guide rails, we bring in the governance to ensure that we're not just having AI running off the rails, which in some cases is what you're seeing. I mean, we've heard, for example, of Grok being drifted in a way where it could be spewing out potentially hateful things, and companies like AISquared, our technologies are specifically designed to eliminate that from happening. That will never happen through AISquared.
I get it. The other thing, like you mentioned this, and this is, again, I have a good vantage point where I sit, because I get to talk to people like you. I get to talk to a lot of different users, producers, etc. What I think AI has created is our attention, emphasis, and money used to go to creating code. Creating code is no longer the bottleneck, right? Have you ever read the book The Gold by Goldratt? It's an old book from master's MBA programs in the 80s. But actually, my friend Gene Kim's book, The Phoenix Project, is based on the goal. And it's about the theory of constraints and bottlenecks in the manufacture. This was more in the manufacturing, not software. But what we've done is we've broken the dam on code creation, right? We're creating more code than we ever have created. But, that's the theory of constraints. As soon as you break that bottleneck, you run into another bottleneck. And that bottleneck where we are now is, all right, we got all this code. Governance, security, compliance. How do we test it all? And I think at each bottleneck, AI is going to play a place, because you kind of need AI to use AI. But we're learning this, right? One bottleneck at a time, right? That's what we're going through right now. But this is the process. This is evolution, right? Happening in real time, right before our eyes. So,
I call that the ironies of AI. It's exactly what you're describing, where we create AI to do all this work, but it gets to the point where we need AI to govern the work, and then we need AI. So it just kind of continues to build upon itself.
Yeah. It becomes like a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy thing. But
Exactly.
And we're seeing it in cyber too, right? I have 25 years in the InfoSec cyberspace. You need AI to secure AI. You need AI to
Exactly.
fight AI because the bad guys have AI.
That's right.
So this goes, it's a bit of a circular kind of thing, but I don't, this is the world we're in right now. Anyway, Darren, I want to thank you for coming up here on Techstrong TV. We probably did more than our 15 minutes. I apologize.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Keep us posted on what AISquared is doing. Come back anytime. Let's chat.
It would be my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alan. Appreciate it.
All righty. Again, that website is AISquared.ai. AI, you got the squared, like the number 2 squared.
You got it.
.ai. All right. Darren Kimura, CEO and president of AISquared here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hey, everybody, welcome. You've joined us for another episode of Agents of Dev. I'm Mitch Ashley. I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice with Futurum Group, co-hosting this podcast with Brad Shimon. Welcome, Brad. You are the practice lead of
data engineering, data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure. I'm trying to grow beyond the basics because we're moving past all of those mundane use cases and job roles now.
everything is engineering. We're all builders.
We're just intent shepherd. We're just shepherding intent.
Shepherds. Yes, there's a lot of truth to that. It is fascinating how, just my mind getting around what this change really is about. And it's just, I feel like I'm just starting to really grok it and grep it.
Well, I think you're ahead of the class then, sir, because
I don't know that.
I'm this week I'm at Microsoft FabCon and the first ever SQL Con, which I love the fact that we're actually starting up a conference in 2026 about SQL.
Oh, Renaissance Week. Okay.
It's brand new. Never been seen or tried before. Anyway, it is amazing to me just how much energy continues in our little industry around AI and in the midst of a complete lack of understanding of how it actually works.
Yes. I don't know, but it's going to be great. Right?
Exactly right.
When we get there, we'll know it. Something like that.
Will we? I don't know.
Well, the target will have moved. That's the challenging part. That was the target.
The end. Zeno's paradox, but you never get to the finish line because you're always just partly there and partly there.
It's journey. It's the journey for sure. Well, hey, let's do the call out segment. You want to kick that off?
Yeah, sure. So I try to keep my eye on the news while I'm on the road, which is never easy, but it did capture my attention, a small release by a certain data warehousing company called Snowflake. They rolled out a new product called Snowwork, which may sound somewhat familiar if you're familiar with Anthropic Claude Cowork, because it is literally the same idea, but envisioned and delivered within the ecosystem of Snowflake. And what's great about it, I mean, I think that you and I talk about this quite a bit, is agentic software development is really a bellwether and a pointer for where other markets are going to go. And I think that the things that we've learned about agentic development are now trickling into or avalanching into other aspects of like data practitioners. And so Snowflake is really, taking the idea from Anthropic and applying it to things like, having a conversation with your data that can take action, that can do things, and do things with a much more much more trust and belief in the data that you're actually looking at. Because
Mm-hmm.
for those of you following on at home within the data space for quite some time now, we've been trying to be able to talk to data and have conversations with data, and that was like through NLP and other type technologies, which forced you to know exactly the names of the columns and whatnot when you typed your question, or it would be wrong. And we are apparently, hopefully, moving beyond that. And this is what we're seeing from Snowflake with their snow work.
The semantic layer. I know that's where you were going eventually.
It is exactly, yeah. It is big time at this conference, at the Microsoft conference that I'm at this week.
Is there a, do you sense just kind of a change in tenor, tone, where it's headed? Is like it's starting into something definitely different.
Yeah, I think that many of the problems that we used to face, such as building and maintaining data integration pipelines, is but one of many examples. We're starting to think of AI as a means to a layer of abstraction above that, such that it's not just being able to automate it, because we could do that before, but it was brittle. These things were always breaking, and you would be perhaps not shocked to know how many companies currently rely on nightly secure FTP uploads of CSV files to get stuff done.
Yes. Yeah. They aren't going
but-
away anytime soon, but they may have agents.
Well,
doing
they
it.
might not have to. I mean, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe, if you can have a non-deterministic system that can see the context that it's operating in and take action, as we talk about so often in the stuff we're working on, maybe you don't need to have somebody that's dedicated to keeping that thing running. Maybe it can be self-correcting. Maybe it can be, preemptive in alerting me to a problem that I might not even know is happening.
Mm-hmm. I had not heard about snow work. Sounds
Snow
like
work.
what they do in the Colorado mountains when we do have snow. They have some
Do.
snow work to do.
Unless it's yellow, and then you don't.
Yes, no, stay away from that. But there's enough territory there; you can usually avoid that. Well, let's get this was NVIDIA GTC week, and
Yeah.
Nick and I had a chance. Nick Patience and I had a chance to do a report on that, and but you couldn't cover it. NVIDIA GTC is now the Steve Jobs announcement equivalent, where all the oxygen left out of the room. It was the event horizon of which nothing else was happening. But I think in this case, the difference is, and everyone else and their brother, sister, mother, and uncle are announcing something with that NVIDIA at the same time.
Right.
They're
Riding
riding the
those
coattails.
coattails. Yeah.
Yeah, and a big time. It was really fascinating. But what caught my eye was, my ear was Jensen spent, I don't know, the first 45 minutes, maybe an hour, talking about software. He didn't talk
That
about
is
hardware.
really weird. Yeah,
He talked about
that's freaking me
software.
out. Yeah.
And applications, and it's like he got the memo about software's eating the world. Like, hey, that's very in 19 whatever. Was
That
it 12?
is still, yes,
20?
but still relevant.
Still relevant. And he went, of course, he went into the whole Neil Cloud. We'll get into that. But what jumped out to you about GTC?
Yeah, I mean, the couple things. The first one, I think you and Nick probably wrote about, and I think if those of you who sort of know of our little ecosystem, perhaps watched one of our utilizing AI podcasts recently, where Nick and I chatted about the show, and he made note of the fact that Jensen sat down with a good number of very influential open source model makers, and it is something that we as analysts have chided NVIDIA about in the past, mostly with regards to the the software layer that sits between the GPU and the operating system. That's not always been the most open, but you can see in what Jensen's prioritization from this conference and this panel I'm talking about, just how critical the open source ecosystem is to NVIDIA, and how they want to support it. They see for instance, that, in the United States anyway, there's a bit of a pullback right now away from open source. And I should say, actually, perhaps that same thing is happening elsewhere in China. We can chat about that in some detail. But for NVIDIA, they live and breathe with developers and data scientists and those people that work with software. So they need to not just honor but support that community that's driving so much innovation in AI.
Well, developers, you can spread that out too, are the tip of the spear. I've said that for a long time. It's like, this is where the highest degree of innovation and the
Yep.
application of AI and the transformation of what that work looks like. If that isn't happening in other areas, but developers are just wired differently. They seek this stuff. They figure out what they can do with it. They're excited about it. They don't mind changing their jobs because they don't want to do the same boring
They want
stuff.
to. They seek that out because they
Exactly.
don't want to write code or document it.
And they want to show their friends. They want to go and be, hey, look at this. This is awesome. Put it up there. It's open source. It's whatever.
Yep.
So it still is, and I think it's going to be that way for quite some time. Now the
Thankfully,
builder community will expand, and I think that it's, you can see. I was just talking to a salesperson this afternoon, and he was talking about, I like to make my job more efficient, and I'm not really a technical person, but I do think about ways I could do this. How could I not? It's like, yeah, you're a builder. You will have the tools to do this.
we're
Pretty
all
soon, hang on
builders now.
tight. If you're not already there, and if you wanted to download OpenClaw, you could.
Well, because speaking of that, can we talk about OpenClaw? Can we talk about Multibook and OpenClaw?
Moldbook, yes. What happened?
So I
The
don't know.
social network.
I am still trying to wrap my head around why Meta would acquire that asset, because anyone who followed what was going on with that would certainly tip their head like a dog trying to hear and understand better, to say, well, wait a minute, wasn't this a bit of a scam? Wasn't this really just people trying to drive, this unrealistic vision of AGI, that these Claude bots at the time were all having a conversation on their own and it wasn't actually happening. So don't know, but maybe we should put that aside and just talk about NVIDIA, who is jumping on the OpenClaw bandwagon pretty heavily
Yeah.
with GTC and their Nemotron and OpenClaw announcement, which to me, I saw that and I'm like, yeah, they're the ones to really make this realistic. And by realistic, I mean something that isn't going to cause immediate and irreparable harm to whoever uses it. That's what they're doing.
They're going to bring down the internet.
or your MacBook, or not MacBook, sorry, your Mini, your Mac Mini. Yeah, right.
So, here's what I think is interesting. One of the things I think, Jensen definitely got right, and he gets a lot of things right too. Of course, he tends to create his own reality. But last year, MCP was the thing that was the viral, changed everything, right? Because it just opened up what you could do with agents, solved the problem everybody had. Everybody had tin can vegetables, but nobody had a can opener. And suddenly here's the can opener. Everybody jumped onto it, right? To make a really poor analogy. This year it's OpenClaw. And I think it's OpenClaw because what it's done is shown, it's dropped the barrier to get into the agent creation and management and do stuff with AI. Now, maybe it's not safe all the time or done well, and enterprise has a little different requirements, which is what Jensen went after with their offering. But everybody's is dropping an OpenClaw offering, right? Or they're dropping something like it. So you talked about the work, snow work.
Yeah, right. That could be seen as very similar.
And Complexity Computer, and they're going to come out with personal computer version of it.
Or anyone using Ralph to have their agentic tooling do work on problems till they're done. That's the same thing.
we've gone into this. What was the utility knife everybody had to have? If you
Oh,
remember that.
not the Swiss Army knife, but what came after that, the Leatherman multi-tool.
The Leatherman, that's what it was. Like everybody's
yeah.
got to have the Leatherman, right? You got to have my toolkit. And that, I think that's what this year's about, is everybody being able to start to exercise what this means to use it and create agents. I think the other part of it too, you didn't say it this way, but the edge is the new cloud. When did we rush out to buy Mac Minis for anything, or the latest edge computer for what? Maybe to do a LAN party, to do a gaming, but I mean, really, the fact that we have run on hardware to be able to do this stuff locally on your own, you don't need the
It is
cloud.
amazing.
Yes.
Do you know why that it actually works? It is because of software.
Well, yeah, there's that little thing called software, and it's
No, I
accessible.
don't mean just
If you think
possible.
that-
I mean, the reason why it's actually feasible is
Oh,
good
okay.
software.
You're being real. You're making a real comment, not a funny.
I am seriously. Like, you think of OpenClaw is built on one of I think we were chatting about this a week ago about the Pi. This rifle is mine, but in the form of an agentic harness, and OpenClaw is built on top of it. It's built on other ideas. It's built on the work of many people.
It is. I mean, that's kind of that shoulder of giants. Maybe they're small giants, but a lot of small giants. There were a
Adds
few
up.
big ones along the way. Yeah, exactly. So I think the sort of kimono's open, or the the barn door's open, and all the animals are running out and having fun in the pasture. Right? It is a good time, and what's been exciting for me is just in my own work. So you'll love this. I was saying this to you before. So it developed this framework, observability native, all around the premise that observability can't be an operations thing. If agents are going to build agents, and agents are part of all that workflow happening from spec plan all the way through deployment and beyond, whatever's beyond, it's everywhere. You can't just observe agents when they get into production. You have to observe the agents that are creating agents that are part of the underlying fabric. And so I created these seven pillars and 4 steps in an agent operating cycle, and I had folks like you and Fernando review it. So I gave my write-up. It's not a spec, but it's kind of a definitional, foundational document.
It was very thorough, which to me is kind of a spec.
Well, thank you. I guess we can call it a spec. I hate to say that because somebody will look at it and say, it's not a spec. But so I gave it to my agentic operating environment that I do development with. And it said, we're doing some of these things. We're doing 1, 3, and 5 already. And here's what we have. Here's the ones we need to address. Here's 2, 4, and 6. We can do those really easy. Here's what we need to go change and what we need to fix about it. 7's a little bit more challenging, but we can do that too. In an hour and a half, the whole thing was instrumented and implemented, all of it. Now, there was a lot of things built to your shoulder of giants. There are a lot of things already in place. But if I was going to start from scratch as a fundamental architecture or requirement or spec, I wouldn't have had to do any of that. It would just be built in. That's the environment we're working in.
Yeah, it is heady. It is really, there are a lot of downsides to agentic work, of course. We've talked about many of them here. But when I think about, what it means to be a builder, meaning somebody who creates something, and it could be anything, not just a piece of software even, but just an idea. Remember when you used to sit down with your trusted friend and say, "Hey, I got an idea. Let's talk about it." And you would work through it and poke holes in it and whatnot. That took time and opportunity, and it was, not fast. But we have literally sort of collapsed the time to value, if you will, from idea to value to almost nil with these tools. And it's what that means. I don't know.
Well, so I think about these like you do. I think about these things a lot. And I was on a panel day before yesterday, and we were talking about so the first mover advantage is shrinking, right? Because people quickly come
Yep.
out with their own version of OpenClaw or whatever kind of in their products.
Called the
in
10-day
weeks.
mover advantage.
Yeah,
That's
if
what we're
that.
talking about with
And
Claude
that's,
open.
that's going to be, I think that's going to get shorter. Also, I think we're going to get to, maybe this isn't that far away, of, well, do I really need to maintain that code? Do I really need to modernize that code? Well, when I want something, just rebuild it. Don't take the time to go and fix it. Just rebuild it because we
Yes.
get better and better at building it. It's not like our skills are staying the same or we're gradually incrementing and our skills increasing. It's if you follow the curve of models and how quickly they're improving, just how much Claude code has improved I say Claude code in 6 months. It's just like not even the same tool.
It's not. No,
Um,
it's not.
I think we're going to be a point where, software is just, it's like mixing up a new batch of whatever. Okay, cool. We're good.
Maybe it's not even what we knew software to be. Maybe
Maybe.
there's a paper I would love us to dig into and talk about that came
Okay.
out recently that talks about using a directional acyclical graph, DAG, to define basically an intent to outcome map, if you will.
Mhm.
And the idea behind it is to make that a deterministic system that uses a non-deterministic system, meaning a generative agentic system, to actually implement. So you have a fixed route and a fixed outcome, but the way that you get there is up to the agents and the models.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
So maybe, in that situation, back to what we were talking about with data integration pipelines, maybe you just have to say, I really would like, all of my, order to cash data from SAP, flowing into Azure OneLake. Make it so. Number one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you're pointing to something too that also had a bit of an aha this week is there's the model of request response, linear interaction with AI. Do this,
Yeah.
create that. No, don't do that. Do this instead, right? This sort of what I thought originally vibe coding was. And I don't know if vibe coding is a thing anymore, but I think the model really is about it's not a linear process anymore. It's letting AI figure out what to do. You might want to ask it, like the tools that I work with. I say is there's a relationship we have here. My goal is to get to agentic and understand how you're going to do agentic. So I don't want it to be opaque. I want to understand, right?
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
it caused me to do is realize that that worked good over there, but I forced it down a linear path here because I made it go do an assessment.
I didn't
on
give it
certain
right. I didn't
project
give
that
it
I
the
was working
freedom
on.
to maybe choose a better route.
Yeah. It said, this is a table lookup. We don't need to do it. That's not what we're talking about doing here. So, well, how do we make it agentic? So I had to really step back and say, I'm not going to tell you how to do it anymore. Tell me what you want to do. I'll give you some direction. If I need to do it at some point, I don't have to
Yeah.
review that part of it. Yes, you do for security and other reasons, but it's a change in how we work and interface with AI. It's pretty drastic.
It is. And it's fairly recent. You remember how we were talking about prompt engineers as a job a couple of years ago? And this year, and then over the last year, we've been talking about context engineering, which is still highly relevant. But
Mhm.
in the day, a year or so ago, if you worked with a model, you had to be very prescriptive and you would use techniques like chain of thought, for instance, to help guide the model to an output. And what I found experientially is that the less data I give it, the less instruction I give it, sometimes the better the result because I give it that freedom
Mhm.
to wander a bit as you're talking about. There's an old Zen koan, or just actually a saying, not a koan, sorry, but it is a Zen Buddhist saying about if you really want to keep your cattle, horse or cows or whatever, don't watch them constantly. You know, just keep an eye on them every so often. You don't have to chain them up. You don't have to do anything. Just, let them roam in the field and they'll be okay. They're not stupid, mostly.
Mhm. Yeah, they may wander off the off the land here once in a while, but then go get them and bring them back, and
That's right.
I'm going to
That's
stay
right.
there forever.
But if you're holding the cow, constantly, then you're not doing anything else.
Why don't we jump to our last segment?
Okay, it's time for the drop.
You had suggested the drop for this one too, Unsloth Studio. That
Yes.
sounds like a Prompt Foo, another great name. What is Unsloth Studio?
Yeah, it's yet another LM Studio and yet another Olama. Do we need another one? Yes, we do. Absolutely, we do. These are for those who don't use those tools. Means for interacting with AI locally, and with Olama and ML Studio, you have a lot of great capabilities. A lot of control. You can use, the LLM or Llama CCP to do your inferencing, for example. Or if you're on a Mac, you can use MLX inside of ML Studio and run your models quite rapidly. But what those really kind of focus on are basically interacting with models as you would if you were logging into Gemini or Claude or whomever as a chatbot. What Unsloth is known for those of you who perhaps aren't familiar with them, they have been an early sort of proprietor of fine tunes and the tools that you would need to fine tune a model. And not just fine tune, but do all kinds of work like distillations and whatnot. And they put together a ML Studio style interface that focuses on or really elevates some of the work you might be doing with models, such as fine tuning. It's just one of many. And one of them, for instance, I'm quite anxious to try out is being able to they'll have what they call recipes, where you would have a recipe for creating triads for unstructured data. So I could feed it a whole bunch of PDFs, like presentations that we get from vendors, for instance, and I would be able to have it basically create a knowledge graph or just a property graph, probably out of that with all the nodes and edges that are represented in that text from those PDFs. And there's a lot you can do with that, such as use that to fine tune models and generate refined data to do more work with that. And so it's for folks who are in the AI and data fields. This Unsloth Studio is just awesome, and I encourage everyone listening to check it out if you have it. It's it's just a UV pip install away for everyone.
Another example of taking what took massive resources and, in this case, data sciences to do, now making its way into everyone's hands, right? It'll become more and more accessible
Yeah.
and more people. You too can train a model. Like you can train your dragon. Here, train your model.
Right. Tame your dragon. Yeah, it's frontier models are critical, but they're not the only game in town, and we have seen research from early on that indicated that for more task specific, duties like named entity extraction, you would be absolutely wasting resources to throw that at Gemini or Claude.
Well, that's why things, Gemini Flash 1.5 is free. I mean, it may be rate limited or whatever, but it's free.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
or you can run, Gemma on your own
Yeah.
hardware.
Right.
You pick your model, whatever it may be, NeoClaw if you got the right hardware. but that's
Nemotron. Speaking of
Nemotron.
NVIDIA.
Yes. Nemotron, exactly. So here's my drop for the week, and it's sort of a collection of drops that form a rain storm. Yeah,
It's many drops, huh?
it's many drops. I wouldn't say I'm inundated, but every day I get either a briefing or multiple emails or signals from the stuff that find out what's happening out in the world, letting me know about it. Is you reviewed, and I'll be issuing the agent control plane framework document this week. Probably come out the end of this week, maybe first part of next week. And everyone is coming out with just like their studio or their claw or their whatever for building and operating agents. Now vendors are also starting to lay claim to, well, here's the agent control surface, control plane that has things like observability built into it, security, governance, accountability, etc. So you know how you can not only manage it, but you know what your agents are doing, and are they fitting within the guardrails, and are they compliant? Can you do governance on that? Tricentis announced theirs for, they're a testing company. Okay, here's the agent control plane for what we do.
Yeah,
right?
that's
And I
brilliant.
can name a dozen that I think I've gotten hit with in the last week of people coming out with parts of that functionality, which I think is good. But the sort of great sorting, maybe the clone wars of the future are agent control planes fight for dominance and who's going to control the control planes. We'll see what path that
Can't
takes
they all just get
on its way to
along?
Skynet.
Isn't there like a open semantic interchange idea for agent control planes? There should be. Somebody
We
should
need
make
an agent control plane semantic layer. There you are.
Well, the OSI could actually work for that.
It
but
could
they're not.
actually.
But they're not actively promoting it to do that. But it definitely could.
It is a model to build from to be able to do that. Sure. So I think the effect of that is you need that to be able to get AI into production. Enterprises won't let you take anything significant into production at scale unless you can govern it, control it, have accountability around it, secure it. So everybody is naturally doing that for their part of it, so their products and tools can get into production. But I think it's also it is going to create some forcing function to sort that out. Okay, I can't have 50 of them. Maybe could have 5 to 10. Maybe I'd like 1 or 2 or 3. Where is that balance?
Oh
Maybe it's 20 because you have agents controlling the control planes. I don't know.
Say that. That's way too many.
It's a little circular. There's a recursive programming example.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a model that we're not thinking about yet. But that seems to be what's on the next horizon of, okay, I'm being overrun by control planes, folks. Help me out. What do we do here?
We need it. It's like, you have catalogs of catalogs. We need control planes of control planes.
Parts are made of parts. Yes.
It's all an abstraction game.
Oh,
it's
boy.
turtles all the way up.
Well, next week is RSAC, the week this will drop. So I will be there doing some live Techstrong gang videos there. What are you up to next week?
Oh, next week I'm recovering from FabCon and getting ready to visit with Google in their conference at the end of the month.
Google Cloud Next. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's coming up. I'll be going to SUSECon.
That should be
Prague,
interesting.
Yeah.
With all the talk of operating systems being required to capture age verification.
Yeah, verification, lack of TSA people. Can you get back in the country? Hey, it's an adventure. Who knows? I mean, who knows when but I'll be somewhere I can join by digitally to say hello and see what we're doing. I'm also going to the MCP Dev Summit.
Oh, I'm
which
jealous.
is hosted by the Agentic AI Foundation, part of the Linux Foundation. Yeah, I was like, didn't even know it was happening, and they reached out, and I'm sure they'll be reaching out to you for the next one.
Do you think they'll have a session about what comes after MCP because we all over rotated on MCP?
That's my main thing is Is MCP going to stay this, or is it going to become what? What is it?
Right.
What is it?
I don't know. Yeah.
You know, and I
If
got to
it's
believe
just a lookup, maybe it's, already past its sell-by date, but if it's something else that hasn't grown into yet.
is it SMP version 2 waiting for version 3? Or is it like, no, we're going open telemetry here, full out. Let's kind of rethink this problem.
Mhm.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm really excited to see what happens there. So, and we'll get to do the next one together. There's another one in the fall. I forget what it is. But I think that's in San Diego. So we'll find out what's happening there. So that's on the horizon too. So lots of great things happening.
Agreed.
Well, safe travels, my friend. Enjoy the rest of the FabCon, SQL,
Sequel
Crunch.
con. Don't say that.
Sequel. Oh, so sorry. Sequel. Sequel Quan. Enjoy
Wrath of
your time
Khan.
out.
Yes.
And safe travels this weekend
to you.
as you get ready to go and head into Google Next. And while I'm heading out to San Francisco myself. So, well, thanks everybody. You survived another episode of Agents of Dev.
Congratulations, everyone. And
it
thank you.
is an accomplishment. So, we have participation awards for everybody. You'll get your prize soon. No, seriously, thanks for being with us for part of this discussion. Please reach out, follow, share. We appreciate everything you do to be part of this community. And we'll look forward to talking with you soon.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Morera. Happy to be here. First time as a presenter here, but I'm no stranger to Field Day. I've been a delegate a few times in the past, a few years ago. So I'm very happy to be here. And something that I've learned during that experience is that you guys like to dive deep right away, and that's exactly what we're going to do, right? So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite features for VMware Cloud Foundation 9, which is VMware Advanced Memory Tiering with NVMe. You may have heard about it or not, but my goal here is so that you understand what it is, how it works, and how it benefits our customers in a way. I call it the Beyond the DRAM barrier. I wanted to call it the RAM apocalypse. So maybe I should just trademark that from now on. But most of you are aware of what's happening with the prices in RAM, right? So this is a very timely subject, and I hope you get a lot out of it. Yeah, when we're talking about this feature in particular and how it fits within the whole VCF ecosystem, right? We have a lot of components within VCF, right? We have the compute component, storage, networking, which is vSAN, NSX, etc. So the compute component is what you guys know as vSphere, which is vCenter and ESX. And yes, we changed the name back to ESX from ESXi because we like to change things up. So this feature is part of that core compute component. If you say that fast 5 times. So it is included on the core vSphere area, right? So whether you're running VCF, VVF, it is already part of the ecosystem of VCF. Right, so we got that out of the way. So what exactly is memory tiering, right? So I have this quick diagram here. What we're trying to do is leverage less expensive devices to act as memory, right? So in this case, we're going to take high-speed NVMe devices and pair that up with DRAM. DRAM is always going to be that tier 0, what we call tier 0, the first point of entry for the memory pages. And underneath that, we're going to have NVMe devices to kind of back that off, right? But from a VM perspective, we're creating a logical memory unit per se and presenting that to VMs, containers, VKS, whatever you're running on VCF, that's what we're presenting to VM. So from a VM perspective, they have no idea what is happening. They don't know there's NVMe, or they don't know there's DRAM, they don't know what type it is. They just know, cool, I have a bunch of memory, I can use that. Great. The way, again, they consume that logical memory. And I do want to point out that this is a native solution, so we don't have a separate appliance anywhere. We're not taking additional resources, a ton of resources anywhere else. So it is part of vSphere, which is that core compute component. And the goal here is to lower the total cost of ownership for what we're seeing here is the cost of DRAM. So even before all this shift to HBM memory happened for AI, we started working on this a few years ago. And we did see that most of the bill of materials, about 80% of it was the cost of memory, just a few years ago. Now that has shifted to almost 96%. So when you go buy a server that is probably now $200,000, 95% of that price comes from memory alone, right? And this is what customers are looking at, and they've been keeping me pretty busy lately asking, hey, by up to 40%, which is what we're doing here, right? So instead of buying 1 terabyte, I can get away by buying 512 gigs of memory, for example. So if we dive a little bit deeper into the NVMe side, you may be asking, well, okay, how does it work to kind of be connected over the wire? Does it have to be direct? So the answer to that is it needs to be a direct connected NVMe device dedicated only for this purpose. A lot of customers think, oh, I'm wasting space. Can I put logs in there? Or no. If you think about it, it's going to affect performance. We don't want anything to affect that I/O path. So we're dedicating a device just for memory. We're creating a partition dedicated for memory alone. And we can scale up depending on the ratios. And I'll talk about the ratios in a second here. The other question I get is, well, cool, that's great. But I know those devices may fail sooner than DRAM. And that's a valid point. So in VCF 9.0, we have support for hardware RAID. So you can buy a controller, even VROC is supported as well. And you can have 2 devices working together. So the memory pages that go into NVMe are going to be mirrored that way. So if you lose one device, you have a backup there. Any questions so far?
I'll throw out one. One that came to mind was, speaking of the DRAM and like the cost and everything, so like what percentage DRAM reduction are customers realistically seeing right now?
So, I mean, I'll explain how it works later, so it will make more sense, but we're seeing about a 40% reduction in cost by doing this. So alone, all of it comes from the memory alone. Not only that, but also you double your density of the VM. So you can bring 2x amount of VMs, and because now you can push the DRAM and NVMe together even more.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah. All right, so that's what it was. But how does it work? Where's the magic here, right? So what we're seeing, I'm going to put this up, right? A lot of customers are seeing this, and even internally, where we're consuming a lot of memory. When you think about those workloads, I used to be an admin back in the day, and my SQL servers every week kept asking for more RAM. I was like, where's this going? Like, 1 terabyte of RAM, and active memory was very small. So what we're seeing here is that we're memory bound on the host level, but also we're seeing that the CPUs are being starved for memory. There is they need to communicate to each other. They need each other to work. And CPUs in this case, they're not really able to push anymore because there's no memory available. So that's another problem. Number one problem here, we run out of memory. The other problem here is that we're not really using resources efficiently, right? So we're wasting space. We're wasting not only resources, but also power, cooling, rack space. If I have a server that is fully populated with CPUs, all the DRAM slots are populated, how can I move forward? I need to buy more servers. And doing that now, it's very, very pricey. So if we dive into that scenario, right, where we're using most of our memory and a little bit of the CPU, we have an algorithm that is proprietary. That is, every few seconds is looking at the activity of the pages. Not only if that page is being used, but how often, how recently, what pattern. So we looked at all these things and we make decisions based on that. And we classify those pages into hot, warm, cold, very cold, right, depending on the activity, every few seconds, and based on that information. And then we bring NVMe, and then we make the decision of moving some of those inactive pages down. So when you look at this, you might be thinking, man, that kind of looks like vSAN. So yes, vSAN OSA back in the day, very similar, right? We push down some of those data that is not being used, push it down to inexpensive devices. So that's exactly what we're doing. We take NVMe, push the pages that are not being touched down to NVMe, and DRAM is going to keep those pages that are active. So from a VM perspective, they're always going to talk to DRAM because they want that data fast, they're going to get it fast. When VM comes down and say, okay, I need that page that is cold, we're going to bring that up to DRAM and we're going to read from DRAM. So we're constantly moving up and down.
Is it per VM or is it host wide, or how can that
yes and no.
be allocated?
Yes, so the way we can configure this is by cluster per host. We can disable the VM. So if a VM is, for example, is latency sensitive, you probably don't want this, right? Just in the chance there's a latency there, so we can disable the VM from having memory tiering. Right. Good question.
So Dave, this Jack Poller from Paradigm Technica. This seems like standard memory tiering and caching, and you're just I don't understand what the secret sauce is here, other than you're pushing. I mean, what's on NVMe? What's the storage mechanism that's on the NVMe bus?
So you think about swapping? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, you've replaced. You've described what is essentially a memory cache, right?
Yeah.
And a cache replacement. We classify what's hot, cold, warm in the cache.
Yep.
And we decide what we evict out of the cache and how we bring it back in. That's standard system memory caching, right?
Right.
So you're pushing it. You keep saying you're pushing it down to NVMe. What's the backing store on NVMe? Is it SSD? Is it DRAM, SRAM on an NVMe card, or
it's a PCIe NVMe device, so it could be any form factor that way. But it would require certain endurance and performance classes to meet the requirement for performance.
So it's just a standard backing store. It could be an SSD. It could be a DRAM, slower DRAM, or something that's somewhere down in the NVMe side of the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Denny Cherry from Denny Cherry Associates Consulting. What's the class? What are you considering when you're looking at the pages? Is it reads? Is it writes? How are you deciding what's hot and what's cold?
Both. So we look at the activity based on how recent it was read or written, how often it was done, the pattern, all those things come into play to make the decisions.
Okay.
Right. Now there's expand here a little bit more on that. If the DRAM is being used maybe only 50%, we don't want to move pages just for the sake of moving pages, right? Because that's additional resources, maybe a performance hit. But so we have to pass a threshold about 70, 75%. When we have memory pressure, then we start proactively moving pages out, right? So we're not being reactive here. We're proactively thinking, okay, we're getting full. This makes some room for the real workloads, for the real pages that are doing work.
So just a quick question, Lino Telero from InfoCert. We are enabling DRAM using this method, this technology, enable to see larger memory than larger capacity than you can have with a single RAM, or there is another.
Yeah, we'll get to the ratios in a second, but yeah, we're starting with a 1-to-1 ratio.
Oh yeah.
So you're doing 100% more right off the bat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, this is presented to a VM as one logical unit, both of these tiers. And once we move pages down to NVMe, make room on DRAM, then we can push more. And here's where I talked about having 2x density on the VMs. We can bring twice as many or 1.5 more VMs here, and then we can push both resources at the same time. Because we have memory available, we can actually utilize more of the CPU that was just sitting there idling, right? So this is what we want to see. We pay for those resources. We want to use as much as we can. I mean, that's the whole idea of virtualization, right? Good questions, by the way. You also may be thinking, and you touched on that, about swapping and ballooning. That's still in place, right? So these methods here, we still have TPS, which is memory sharing, compression, ballooning, swapping. That stays in place. But these are more reactive things that we do down the road. If there's a lot of pressure, we're still going to do swapping and ballooning eventually. Memory tiering is going to come in right after TPS and help us to be more proactive, gives us more space, manage those more intelligently, and those resources, return those resources back to the host. But yeah, if we have more pressure, if we're pushing, overcommitting and doing things like that too much, then we're still going to have those reactive measurements to gather some of those resources back again. Right.
Yeah. Jim Sprinsky, JimTheWhyGuy.com. Can you talk a little bit more about ballooning? I recognize all those other ones, but that's interesting.
Yes, ballooning is, we pretty much have a driver within the guest OS that it starts to inflate. So it's kind of reclaiming some of those pages back. Right.
Okay.
But what happens there is that we don't classify those pages. So because it's reactive, we just, if it's active or cold, it doesn't matter. We're trying to reclaim those memory spots.
Okay.
Much, right.
Thanks for the clarity.
Versus the tiering, where we actually classify the pages, and we don't want to mess with the hot pages.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about what it is, how it works. Now I want to talk about some of the operations. And one of them is the ratios, how to configure all that stuff. So we came up with memory tiering in vSphere 8.0U3, which was tech preview, very limited. And the ratio was a 4-to-1, a DRAM to NVMe ratio, meaning that you could only expand 25% with NVMe. It's small, but 25% more is more. It's okay. Now we went GA with VCF 9, and the default now is a 1-to-1 ratio. So you have 100% more out of the bag, right? So you have, for example, a host with 256 gigs of DRAM. You buy a drive that's at least the same size, and you get twice as much. You get almost half a terabyte. What if, we go and we buy a bigger drive? So if we don't change the ratio, we're still only going to use 256 because we're basing everything off the DRAM. A couple of things happen here. Number one, with the NVMe controller, we're leveling, so we're just, distributing those reads and writes across the drive, even if it's bigger. So it's going to extend the life of that drive a little longer. Based on our testing, endurance and performance classes that we require or recommend, those drives should last about 5 years. So having a bigger drive doesn't hurt to extend it a little more, but also it prepares you for the future, right? So we know your workloads are great for a 1-to-1 ratio, but what if the active memory is really low, right? I can actually push this even more and change my ratio to a 1-to-2. So I get 300% or 200% more, giving me almost a terabyte. And then didn't have to do anything. So I had the same drive from example 2, 512. The partition was already created. All I did was go to vSphere, change my ratio from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-2, and now I have an extra 256 gigs of memory from that. So that is allows you to be very flexible, expanding. So just imagine doing this with DRAM alone, right? You have to take some DIMMs out, put bigger DIMMs in, etc. So it's a little harder. So this is very flexible and it allows you to go up and down as necessary.
How far can you push that?
So we can go up to 4x.
Okay.
So there's some workloads that we notice, for example, VDI, right? Some of them are not doing much, they're just a kiosk somewhere. So we can push those up to 4x. The maximum partition size is 4 terabytes for now. So hopefully we can expand that later. I was talking to our customer yesterday, they have huge infrastructure, so they want to push that up even more. So 4 terabytes maximum partition size and 4x memory increase here. And also last example, it doesn't matter what the ratio is. If you don't have a big enough drive, obviously you can't make space out of nothing. So I bring this up just for those that are watching, you guys, it's important to properly size, think about the future, what can you, it is to invest here. Don't try to save money on getting a smaller drive. You're saving a lot of money already with DRAM alone. So don't try to cut corners here. All right, another question I get is, does this work with everything else, right? When there's a new feature and we say, oh, this doesn't support vMotion, people are not very excited, and rightfully so. vSphere's been around for over 20 years, and HA, DRS, vMotion, that's something that is very important for admins, and being an admin back in the day, it's I can see that. So yes, we support HA, DRS, fast suspend resume, which is what we use when we hot add, hot remove devices. So yeah, definitely I talked about RAID being supported. And vMotion is interesting. And I say interesting because you can configure an entire cluster, but I also said you can configure per host, which means that you can have, within the cluster, you can have a host that is configured for memory tiering, but some other hosts are not configured for memory tiering, right? Why? Because maybe you have VMs that are latency sensitive, and maybe monster VMs that we don't support there yet. Maybe you want to put them on those hosts, right? So there's some flexibility there. But vMotion knows that, okay, this host has memory tiering, this one doesn't. I can still move stuff from DRAM to DRAM, and if I have memory tiering, I can do the tier out capability. If I don't, then I just keep it on DRAM. So it does know, it's aware of that.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned all of the features that are supported.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention any features that are not supported.
Features, or the unsupported stuff is mostly VM profiles. So security VMs. So if you think about TDX, SEV, they encrypt the memory, right? So we can't actually see the memory pages to classify them. So that's one thing, I've been getting a lot of questions about lately. Okay. Those are not supported. Monster VMs, latency VMs because of performance. And there was a couple more, but yeah, we're going down the list and trying to get through those. So this is the first version. There's about maybe 5 VM profiles now supported, but next version will be less and less and less.
Okay, great.
So for those types of VMs, do you have to, if you had it configured and enabled at the cluster level, would you have to then go disable it on those specific
At the VM level? Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go to the VM level or have dedicated host for those. Yep. So,
oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, and then what happens if the NVM tier becomes full? Like, does it fall back to compression or does it get swapped?
yep, it goes down the list of reactive measures there. Yep.
But it sounds like this is going to potentially conflict with the guest OS's own concept of memory management. Are there specific use cases that should or should not be used for this, that you should not use this or should use this for?
So some that we've seen so far, like in memory databases, obviously that's something I wouldn't use for, at least yet. I did mention the latency sensitive. There's some there. We have a list on our performance guide that I can share.
Right. But what is your? How do you understand what the operating system is doing in measuring in managing its own memory pools versus what you're doing? It seems like you're in conflict. That if the guest OS, right, if you're running a Linux system, it's got its own concept of all the memory, the physical memory that it has. It may not be, it's virtualized physical memory, right? And now you're virtualizing physical memory again, but that OS has a concept of what it thinks is going to be used and is doing memory page replacement based on what it knows is going to be used or not used. So in a normal situation where it's not just an in-memory database is just a pile of memory, but for a normal application running here, you're potentially in conflict with what the OS is doing.
Yes and no. I mean, we do it at a higher level because that's transparent to the guest OS, pretty much what we're doing, right? So we're trying to be proactive. If I mentioned the patterns and all those things, right? If we know that page we may be read soon, we may be able to move it before it gets called out from the VM. So there's a lot I can't talk about the algorithm itself, but yeah, we do it at a higher level and try to be proactive about what the VM is trying to do, if that makes sense. I can share more info with you later.
Thank you.
Thanks. The other question I get is security, right? It's a SSD drive. I can walk into a data center, pull out a drive, and get some memory pages out of that, point taken. So we do support encryption. We support it at 2 levels. So we can tell the host, hey, any data coming into that NVMe device, you can encrypt everything. So all those VMs within the host are going to get their pages encrypted when they move down to NVMe. Also, we can do it at the VM level. So we can go VM by VM, enable encryption for NVMe if you want to. Now, this also works with all the other encryption stuff that we have. VM encryption, vSAN encryption, vMotion encryption, all that stuff. There are separate layers everywhere. It works, again, at a different layer, and it is supported with the entire ecosystem. Configuration. So 9.0 and forward, right, we're leveraging VMware configuration profiles, which is kind of like host profiles, but for the entire cluster. So here what we're doing is just going in, enabling memory tiering, and you're passing that out to all the hosts. You can obviously get some host overrides if you don't want to do that, but this is the easiest way you can do it. You can do Power CLI, ESX CLI commands as well, if you wanna go that route. So the advantage of using VCP configuration profiles is that you set it and then it lets it do its thing, right? In 9.0, it does require maintenance mode, reboot, and but it will roll through all those based on whether you have vSAN or not, what VMs needs to be moved, etc. So once you set it, it does all the stuff for you. Right? Some failure scenarios, obviously with RAID, if one device fails, it will go to the other device, right? Pretty straightforward. But what if I'm using a single device, which some people don't like to use a controller. I understand why it's an additional cost. Now you get a new point of failure there. There are some other cons in there. But if you have a single device, which we support, an HA event will be triggered on the VMs. And I say VMs because only the VM pages are going to NVMe. All the memory pages for the kernel they stay on DRAM always. So if we have a failure on a single device, the host keeps running fine. The VMs may or may not have an HA event. And I say that because they will fail when the VM tries to call down those pages that are inactive, right? So as soon as you lose a drive, some of those VMs may go down right away. They reboot somewhere else, or 10 minutes later, you may see a couple more, or an hour later, or never, right? If that VM gets rebooted before any of that. So yeah, it's not a full crash per se, but it kind of stagger in a way, depending on the workload, what the workloads are doing. All right, and I wanted to leave you with this. There's a lot of information here. The performance white paper I was talking about that has a ton of information. It's here. So on the performance, there's a blog and a white paper. Definitely take a look at that. I have a series for a blog series for deploying considerations. I talk about what devices to use, why, sizing, what qualifies a workload to be compliant for this, etc. So definitely a lot of information here. Hands-on lab. If you want to kick the tires, configure it, play with it. Definitely take advantage of that. All right, so to recap what we talked about, main driver here is to help our customers lower their TCO. And we've seen this up to 40%, this was even before the Rampacalypse, right? So a lot of customers now are very actively looking to deploy this, to save a lot of that cost. VM consolidation, again, when we saw that diagram, moving pages down to NVMe allows us to free up DRAM, be able to utilize more of that CPU resources. So we have more VMs running on the same host, saves us some extra money there by not having to buy additional servers. And yes, being able to use all the resources more efficiently, DRAM, CPU, NVMe, all that stuff. Any last questions before I get cut off?
I want to make sure I heard this right, that this feature is both in VCF and VVF?
Yes, it's a vSphere component pretty much.
Okay.
It's at the core. All right. So with that, I want to thank you all. Great questions. I appreciate it. And if you need more information, I'm happy to help. Thank you.